So, because I'm kind of an idiot and forgot that ReZero likes to sometimes rearrange the chronology of the light novels, a lot of what I covered from episode 3 made its way into episode 5. So, allow me to apologize for making that mistake and not being more considerate of how the anime could possibly be adapted. In any case, I'll be sure to mark everything that I think could be included in a later episode as a potential spoiler. That way you can just skip past anything that you may not want to know. Anyway, let's talk about episode 30, the first step of a long journey, covering the final chapter of volume 10 of the light novel. Subaru's conversation with Echidna went on for a lot longer than what was shown. There were quite a few additional topics to the conversation that served to add a lot more depth as to why the trial itself was given, part of which provides more context as to why Emilia seems to be struggling with it so much. So, if we start at the beginning, it came as a surprise to Echidna when she saw that Subaru wasn't very shocked to find her there. It was almost as if he'd known that this world was an illusion the entire time. I mean, he actually did have his suspicions. Subaru had been taking note of various oddities with his surroundings. Ever since his commute to school, he noticed a severe lack of any human presence. Then, once he finally arrived only to see that no one else was around, well, that was just an impossible situation that didn't fall within the bounds of what he would call normal. He felt that if Echidna really wanted to fool him, then she should have put more effort into the background. To him, the world was just too bare. It was as if it had been completely stripped of anything that he wasn't intended to see. So that's how he was able to piece together that he wasn't actually taken back to his own world. Now, as Subaru began to ask his questions, Echidna made it clear that the only thing she tampered from his memories was everything related to her. Even though that's what she was saying, Subaru still wasn't sure if her words could be trusted. There was no foundation of trust established between the two of them yet. Plus, it didn't help that his gut was constantly telling him not to believe her. But whether he did or didn't really matter since there was not much he could do about it anyway. In any case, Echidna began to talk more about the trial itself. Specifically about why it was that facing his past was even considered to be a trial in the first place. The way she put it, everyone has some form of regret when it comes to their past. She saw it as human nature to live each day with that lingering feeling of regret that somehow, some way, something could have been better. Although she was very much correct, that was more the pessimistic way of putting it. Subaru, on the other hand, had a more positive outlook. He liked to believe that regret leads to reflection, and reflection is what allows you to correct the mistakes of yesterday so that you can do even better today and tomorrow. That too was part of human nature, and it was the core teaching of what Echidna wanted Subaru to learn. The thing is, not every person can look at their regrets with such an optimistic attitude. Most people would only look at the negative aspects that Echidna initially spoke of, never to look back and try to correct what it was that led them down this path of regret in the first place. It was such a small difference in perception, yet one that made a very big difference in how people viewed their past. The fact that Subaru was able to quickly come to such a conclusion had spurred a significant level of interest from Echidna. She got extremely close to his face, then told him how the person he was yesterday is far more ignorant than the person he is now. Not only that, but the person he is now also lacks in knowledge compared to the person he will be tomorrow. It was an analogy for the ensuing fact that the past is inferior to the present, and the present is inferior to the future. Echidna was so enthralled by this subject that the more she spoke on it, the more passionate she became, continuously overwhelming Subaru as she drew closer to the overall objective of the trial. You see, the purpose of this first test was to see if people could perceive their past in that optimistic manner, to see if they could look back at their regrets and find some sort of answer. It didn't matter what type of answer they found, so long as they came out of this trial with a greater sense of knowledge, a knowledge that would undoubtedly help them to overcome the future. Echidna would always be there at the end of the trial to affirm that person's answer, but whether they chose to deny or accept their past was completely up to them. The only thing that mattered to her was that they were able to come to some sort of conclusion. That was the proof that showed they had faced their past by overcoming the anguish and sorrow that previously shrouded it. It was until that answer could be found that anyone eligible to could take the trial as many times as needed. All because this was something that Echidna found to be very important. If not for the person taking the trial, at least for Echidna to satisfy her boundless curiosity. Ideally, she would prefer that everyone accept their past in a way similar to how Subaru did, but she wouldn't prevent someone from passing the trial just because they chose to reject it. The core of the matter was just being able to face your past head on. something that Emilia has very clearly been struggling with. She doesn't seem to want to either accept or reject her past. Instead, it's almost as if she's trying to avoid it completely. I mean, now knowing the specifics of the trial plus the events of the Frozen Bonds OVA, it makes sense that Emilia would have a very tough time facing her past. We don't know the exact specifics as to what happened to her or her people, but we do know that it's surrounded by a significant tragedy. So it's not too unlikely to assume that she's trying to run away from her problems, much like how Subaru tried to do before. On the other hand, Subaru quickly found an answer relating both to his feelings of guilt and the trauma that stemmed from it. The thing is, it wasn't the trial that helped him to arrive at these answers. No, if it was, then the trial would have taken much longer and Echidna would have had a significantly more amusing show. Unfortunately for her, Subaru already seemed to have an answer with regards to how to face his painful past. One that came from a certain special someone at the time when he needed it most. It's how he was able to easily accept all the glaring faults from his past. Now, when Echidna was talking about how the world was purely made up of his memories alone, she was further testing Subaru by trying to insert various thoughts of doubt into his answer. She wanted him to second guess the fact that the people he was talking to may not have been how his real parents may have actually reacted. That being said, now it was Subaru's turn to get up close and personal with Echidna. Because he was very confident in how he knew his parents, he was able to proudly reaffirm that that's how they were, making Echidna a lot less overwhelming in the process. Anyway, that was pretty much it for what we missed from the trial. And since a lot of the middle events was stuff that I already covered back in episode 3, we can now fast forward all the way to the long-awaited conversation between Subaru and Roswaal. At the beginning, Roswaal was recounting all of the feats Subaru performed while he was away. Because Subaru had proven his words from the time that he declared himself to be Emilia's knight, Roswaal decided that once they returned from Sanctuary that he would genuinely appoint Subaru with that prestigious title. By defeating both the White Whale and a witch cult Archbishop, Subaru had shown that he was more than worthy of being called a knight. So Roswaal saw it as a fitting reward. But as Roswaal began to reveal why it was he refrained from participating in the battles, the title just didn't seem to be so prestigious anymore. Sure, becoming a knight acknowledges the purpose of the battles he fought, but knowing those battles were filled with so much regret made him feel like maybe it wasn't something worth honoring after all. Now, one key thing to note about this whole situation was that Roswaal vowed to only speak the truth. If he was unable to say something, then he would say so, and if it was something Subaru wasn't yet ready to hear, then he wouldn't say it. But everything that he could answer would be nothing but the truth. It's why Subaru just couldn't make sense of the heartless method Roswaal chose to approach the whole situation. Sure, the end result may have been better than Roswaal could have ever imagined, but to put that level of trust into someone who made such a fool of himself the last time he was seen was just an incomprehensible action. So when Roswaal said that he left it in Subaru's hands because he trusted him, Subaru was certain that Roswaal was joking. Despite Roswaal saying that he was only going to tell the truth, those words caused for nothing but disbelief. Subaru then wanted to know what it was that Roswaal saw that made him be trusted for such an important job. But that was one of the few things that Roswaal couldn't mention, leading us into the final moments of this heated discussion. So far it hadn't been very helpful, but at least Subaru now knew that Emilia was being manipulated by Roswaal. Towards the end, Subaru made a statement that I personally feel bears a bit more significance than what we were led to believe. He said that no good death would be waiting for him, to which Roswaal simply accepted as if it was a common truth. He seemed to already be aware of the grim fate that awaited him at the end of his life. Apparently it's the reason why he feels the need to spare no effort in trying to achieve his goals within this era. A very peculiar choice of words. Now, the conversation didn't actually end there though. There was one last question that Subaru wanted to ask, one pertaining to Beatrice's words about how all his answers could be found in Sanctuary. Since this could be a topic included in a later episode, feel free to skip to the following timestamp. But what Subaru asked specifically was to know the meaning behind Beatrice's words that day. If he could figure that out, then perhaps he could learn why it was she had such a sad look on her face the last time he saw her. It was a question to which Roswaal responded with a question of his own. Because Subaru had entered the tomb and come out unscathed, Roswaal wanted to know if Subaru had met a certain someone while inside. It was a pretty valid question considering that Subaru should have had the same wounds as Roswaal. The only explanation for him being completely fine would be that he had taken the trial, which means he could have met a certain someone while doing so. Of course, this was something he didn't yet want to tell Roswaal though, especially since he was someone that he could no longer trust. He couldn't even begin to imagine what type of schemes Roswaal would conjure had he known that Subaru had completed one of the trials. As for who Roswaal could have been inquiring about, well, Subaru wasn't so sure who it could have been. So since it wasn't anyone that Subaru could specifically remember, that meant it wasn't yet time to answer his question relating to Beatrice. So in the end, the whole conversation from start to finish was highly ambiguous. It was clear that Roswaal had carefully considered how he was going to steer the conversation. That much was obvious by the fact that he started with the reward of becoming a knight in order to make things more favorable for him. He truly was a very manipulative man. Now, it was after this that Subaru went to go see if Emilia had woken up. When she finally did, Subaru made the mistake of asking her about the trial. He wanted to know what kind of past she saw while doing it. The thing is, this wasn't something Subaru should have knowledge of, especially since he didn't yet tell anyone that he had completed the trial himself. So naturally, Emilia wanted to know how he knew the trial was about her past. As much as he wanted to tell her what happened, he knew that her current fragile mental state wouldn't be able to handle knowing that he had already beat the trial. It would only serve to make her feel more helpless than she already does. So instead, Subaru told Emilia that Roswaal was hiding knowledge about the trials. That plus the fact that there were 2 additional ones that needed to be taken after the first one. In any case, seeing Emilia show so much anxiety on the topic made him disregard his initial question, leading us into the conversations that we saw in the anime. So now we can fast forward all the way to after Subaru had left Sanctuary. Because Subaru's Earth Dragon had already memorized the path, Garfield was able to have this one-on-one talk with Subaru. Everything that he was saying gave Subaru a new perspective on Emilia's situation. It made Subaru think that perhaps Emilia didn't actually want to do the trial. What if she didn't want to face her past at all? What if what she truly desired was for someone to step in and rescue her? All those subtle cues could have been Emilia's own way of indirectly telling Subaru that she wants to be saved. Subaru wasn't sure yet if that was the case, but if anyone was going to be her salvation, then he felt it had to be him. Aside from this, the only topic to their conversation that wasn't shown was when Subaru asked what Garfield wanted to do when he was freed. It was a question that caught Garfield by surprise, as if he'd never been asked something like this before. I mean, to someone who could come and go as they please, this question wouldn't seem too odd. But for someone like Garfield who's been trapped within Sanctuary for who knows how long, it was something that he never really gave thought to. So naturally he didn't have an answer either. Anyway, everything after this was pretty much the same. The only thing they left out from the mansion was the context they gave for Subaru wanting to check up on Rem first. But I'm fairly certain you can deduce why out of the 4 girls in the mansion, Rem's safety takes top priority. But yeah, that's everything you need to know about episode 5. Now, before I go, I've noticed that quite a few of you have been wanting to know where I get the manga images from. Well, the short answer is Bookwalker. I've been using the Japanese site to purchase the raw versions of the latest manga volumes. Unfortunately, the newest volumes aren't translated yet. But if you are interested in reading the digital English versions of the light novels or previous manga volumes, then Bookwalker would definitely be the best place to do just that. Plus, since I'm partnered with them, you can also use code AniNews to get $5 off your first ebook purchase. So if you're interested in the ReZero source material, or really any other isekai that I cover, then the link to Bookwalker will be in the description down below. Anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time, ciao!